The notification came at exactly 2:03 a.m. Motion detected at the front door. For most people, that alert would mean one of three things: a late visitor, a delivery mistake, or an animal passing too close to the sensor. The homeowner had received similar alerts before, and they had always turned out to be harmless. But this one felt different from the moment it appeared. Not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't. The doorbell camera activated automatically, recording a live feed of the front porch. The system clearly detected movement. It outlined a presence. It tracked something standing directly in front of the door. But when the owner opened the feed and looked at the screen, there was no one there. At first, it seemed like a simple glitch. Motion detection systems rely on contrast, heat signatures, and subtle changes in pixel patterns. It wouldn't be unusual for shifting shadows or passing light to trigger a false alert. But this wasn't a quick flicker or a 1-second misread. The motion indicator remained active. The system continued tracking something that appeared to be standing still, directly in front of the door. The bounding box didn't move randomly. It held position, as if locked onto a person who wasn't visible in the frame. The owner stared at the screen, waiting for some obvious explanation: a neighbor walking into view, a reflection, anything. But nothing appeared. The porch remained completely empty. Instead of ignoring it, the owner replayed the recording, frame by frame, slow motion, looking for anything that might have triggered the system. At normal speed, nothing stood out, but when slowed down, something became noticeable. The motion box wasn't perfectly stable. It shifted slightly, adjusting as if following small movements, not large enough to be obvious in real time, but consistent enough to suggest something was actually there, something just outside the limits of visibility. The more the footage was replayed, the harder it became to dismiss the idea that the camera wasn't malfunctioning at all. It was detecting something real, something the human eye simply couldn't see. The alerts didn't stop. At 2:07 a.m., another notification came through, then another at 2:12, then 2:19. Each time, the system recorded the same scene, the same empty porch, the same invisible presence standing in front of the door. The owner checked the live feed again and again, hoping the pattern would break, but it didn't. Whatever the camera was detecting hadn't moved away. It hadn't left. It was still there. Hours passed, and the notifications continued at irregular intervals, as if whatever was being tracked was shifting slightly, triggering new recordings each time. At 3:41 a.m., something changed, not visibly, but audibly. When reviewing the recording from that moment, a faint sound could be heard in the background. It was subtle, almost lost in the ambient noise of the night, but once noticed, it couldn't be ignored. It sounded like breathing, slow, uneven, close to the microphone, the kind of sound that would normally come from someone standing just inches away from the camera. The owner listened to it several times, increasing the volume, isolating the audio. The porch still looked empty, but the sound remained. That was the moment the situation stopped feeling like a technical issue. The owner considered opening the door, just to check, just to confirm that there was nothing there. But something about the consistency of the alerts made that idea feel dangerous. The system wasn't glitching randomly. It was focused, persistent, as if it had locked on to something and refused to let go. Instead of opening the door, the owner turned on the exterior light. The porch became fully illuminated, clear visibility, no shadows deep enough to hide a person, and still the motion indicator remained active. At 4:12 a.m., the system did something it had never done before. It sent a different type of alert, not just motion detected, but person detected. That classification required higher confidence from the system. It meant the algorithm recognized a human shape based on trained data. The owner stared at the notification, then opened the live feed again. The porch was still empty, completely empty, yet the system was now certain whatever it was detecting wasn't random noise. It believed a person was standing there. Morning eventually came. The alert stopped just before sunrise. When the owner finally opened the door and stepped outside, the porch was exactly as it should have been. No footprints, no objects moved, no signs that anyone had been there. The camera logs, however, told a different story. Over 3 hours of motion recordings, continuous presence, a visitor that had never appeared, but had never left either.
The call came in at 12:18 a.m., during the kind of shift when emergency operators expect domestic disputes, vehicle accidents, and the occasional misdial from someone too frightened or confused to explain clearly what they need. The dispatcher answered in her usual tone, calm and practiced, but the line that responded did not behave like an ordinary emergency call. At first, there was only breathing, slow, uneven, and close to the receiver. Then came a whisper, just loud enough to register an address. The caller did not say their name. They did not describe the emergency. They repeated the address once, then fell silent again. The dispatcher entered it automatically and began the standard questions. What is happening? Are you safe? Is anyone hurt? The line stayed open, but the caller answered nothing at first. Then, in the same low voice, the caller said only, "He's still here." The address triggered no immediate concern inside the dispatch system because the database recognized it as a valid historical property record. Calls tied to older addresses still surface in municipal emergency software long after redevelopment or demolition because the systems preserve location history for legal reasons. But the dispatcher did not know that at the moment. She only knew the voice sounded frightened in a way that felt controlled rather than panicked, as if the caller was trying very hard not to make noise beyond what was absolutely necessary. She sent units immediately while keeping the line open. When she asked the caller whether they could leave the house, the response came after a long pause. "There's no door now." The sentence sounded wrong even as it was spoken, not dramatic, not unstable, just wrong enough to make the dispatcher glance back at the address field again while officers were already on the way. As she continued trying to keep the caller engaged, the dispatcher pulled up the property notes attached to the address. That was when the contradiction appeared. The residence listed there had been destroyed in a fire 7 years earlier. The parcel still existed, but the house itself had not. Insurance records, city permits, and prior emergency history all showed the same thing. The structure had burned completely and was later cleared, leaving only a vacant lot with partial foundation remains and a chain barrier near the rear. The dispatcher read the note twice to make sure she had not misinterpreted it. Then she asked the caller to confirm the address again. The whisper returned immediately, exact and unchanged. Same street number, same road, same city. There was no uncertainty in the answer. Whoever was on the line believed they were inside a house the city considered erased. Patrol units arrived within 6 minutes. The officers expected a call routing problem, perhaps someone in a nearby home unable to speak freely, or a prank designed to send police to an abandoned lot. But when they pulled up to the address, the scene matched the old records exactly. No standing structure, no active residence, just a low field of broken concrete, overgrown grass, and blackened fragments still embedded in the ground where the fire had done the most damage years earlier. Their headlights moved over the ruins without revealing any vehicle, person, or source of light. Yet back at dispatch, the call was still active. The operator could hear shallow breathing and occasional background sounds that resembled movement inside a room, subtle scraping, soft creaks, the acoustic texture of enclosed space. None of those sounds matched what officers saw under open night sky. The first officer stepped through the broken foundation line with a flashlight, while his partner remained by the car radio. There was nowhere to hide in the obvious sense. The lot was too open, too damaged, too exposed. If someone had been crouched there using a mobile phone, the patrol lights likely would have found them at once. But the dispatcher's audio suggested something else entirely. At one point, she asked if the caller could see the police outside. The answer came quickly this time: they're not outside yet. That was impossible. The officers had already been on the property for nearly a minute. The line remained connected to the same address. The callers sounded as if they were experiencing a version of the scene where the police had not arrived yet at all. The dispatcher signaled the officers to stay on scene while she transferred a live copy of the call to a supervisor. Together, they listened for anything that could identify background location: dogs, traffic, rain, televisions. But the audio did not sound like open air. It sounded enclosed, muffled in a way experts later described as consistent with a handset inside a furnished room. Then came another whisper, clearer than before: "He's in the hallway." The phrase chilled everyone who heard it. For the same reason, there was no hallway. There had not been one for 7 years, yet the voice on the line continued describing movement within a structure that no longer existed in the present tense, as if the fire and demolition had never happened from the caller's perspective. When detectives later reviewed the call log, they found the routing itself was almost as troubling as the audio. The incoming call had not come from a cellular tower, nor from any currently active landline registered to the parcel. Instead, it appeared through a legacy routing path once tied to the house's original wired service, a system line that should have been disconnected entirely after the fire investigation closed. Utility maps confirmed that the copper pair serving the residents had been cut years earlier and abandoned during street repairs. In theory, a call from that number should have been impossible at the device level and the network level. Yet the emergency center had received it cleanly enough to display the correct historical address and keep the line stable for nearly 9 minutes. Because no one could find a living caller on the lot, officers widened their search to surrounding properties. Neighbors on both sides were interviewed that same night. One recalled the old fire clearly and swore no one had lived on the lot since. Another reported hearing nothing unusual until the police arrived. A third, however, offered something stranger. She said that some nights, usually after midnight, she still thought she heard a phone ringing from the empty property, faint and distant, like a sound carrying from inside a closed house rather than across an open lot. She never reported it because it stopped quickly, and because, in her words, you can't call the police because an empty place sounds occupied. That sentence stayed in the case file longer than anyone expected. Archived fire investigation records were pulled before sunrise. The original blaze had started in the back hallway of the house, according to the official report, spreading rapidly through older timber framing and interior insulation. Only one resident was listed in the final paperwork, a man who died in the fire after neighbors reported he went back inside looking for someone else. No second body was ever recovered. At the time, investigators assumed the witness statements were confused with smoke and panic. But the emergency file also contained an earlier notation from the same address, 2 prior calls over the previous month reporting someone breathing on the line and then whispering before disconnecting. Those calls had been too brief to act on. No one connected them to the final fire afterward. The property photograph taken before demolition became one of the most examined images in the entire case. It showed the front of the house intact from an earlier tax assessment year: narrow porch, 2 windows, a hallway along